Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome to the second class of the Nectar of Instruction. And we actually have some participants that are here. We finished the Bhagavad Gita course a little while ago, but Corey and Amanda are joining us for the first time. And so maybe we'll just and Martine. That's right. Long time listener, first time caller. So maybe we'll just get a little hello, little greeting from them. You can introduce yourself briefly. Most of us in Burlington know Martine. Now, of course, Corey and Amanda and Martine were on the retreat to India, but we'll just unmute you, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here to study Nectar of Instruction. So yeah, Corey, go ahead. I'll unmute you. Or you can unmute yourself.
All righty.
There you go.
Hi, everybody. Coming to you live from New Zealand. It's exciting to see so many familiar faces. Look, I mean, first of all, just because of spending so much time with you for 2.5 weeks, just another opportunity to be with so many of you that we got to know so well. Couldn't pass that up. Second of all, I read the Nectar of Instruction last year, and the opportunity to be able to go deeper with someone with as much experience as Shamya is couldn't pass up. Just listening to that recording of last week's class, it was great, and already took some stuff away from it. As far as myself, I first started to get into bhakti about 4 years ago. And just kind of been going deeper and deeper, and really about the last 1.5 years is when I've got really serious about it, and just looking to evolve and grow, and looking forward to doing it with all of you. So thank you for having me.
Krishna, so great to have you. Thank you. And Martine.
Hi everybody, Haribol. I really, since India, have I'm just really yearning to spend more time with all of you, like Corey said, and just really continue to dive deeper with my bhakti. I was gifted this book a couple months ago. I hadn't started it, and when Shamya had said he was going to start this class, I was just really I don't know, I just felt the nudge to join and to be able to be in this class in this way. I was really tempted to do the Gita class, and I felt like it was a Tuesday night with the kids, and there's no reason why I can't be here. So it's just like making it a priority now. So thank you.
We're so grateful you did. Hare Krishna. So let's start with little kirtan and Kishori Gopi.
Amy was actually going to lead the kirtan. You can come sit closer to me.
So I will.
Did you put the musician's audio on? Yeah. You can actually come sit closer to me if you want to. It's nice, you can see Mama. So we'll start with our opening prayers, this invocation, this honoring of all the acharyas, the saintly beings, the teachers who have walked this path before us, right? In gratitude for them bestowing the light of knowledge upon us, removing the darkness of ignorance. We honor all spiritual teachers of all spiritual paths, of all spiritual lineages. All are welcome here. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So as we chant, it's a short kirtan here. It's an invitation to put down whatever you're carrying from your day, whatever you're managing in your mind, and we open our hearts, we open our minds to this sacred mantra, to the holy names, this medicine that if we're willing to take it, can set us free. It can help us to remember truth, to understand truth. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo, Hare Krishna,
Om Jnana-timirantasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarupyascha Kripasantubhya eva cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So we're picking up the Nectar of Instruction. We started it last week and we got through the preface and gave some context on who Rupa Goswami is, how important he is and relevant, and why the book was composed, who it's for, and talked a little bit about the first verse, just like the first couple of words, Vachavegam, controlling the urge to speak. We just touched on that. And let's just get like one reflection to get us started, something that you heard in the class or on the recording, or in trying to apply it, or thinking about how you've applied these principles is come out to you. One reflection from the last week. Leanne.
This book is about understanding and adjusting.
Understanding and acceptance. Love that. Thank you. All right, one more reflection, quick one.
Bhakti is the religion of the soul.
Bhakti is the religion of the soul. Yes, non-sectarian. This is a non-sectarian book. It doesn't actually begin with any kind of sectarian principle at all. In fact, I would argue none of it is sectarian, but it's immediately relatable because it starts with the mind, with the senses. This is a good entryway into our discussion for today, because the first verse, as you'll recall, and I'll share the screen here. One second. First verse. Vachavegam manasakrotvegam jihvavegam udarapastvegam etan vegan yovishahit tira sarvamapi mam prativing sashusyat. Lists 6 different urges. And what happens if one develops the power to tolerate those urges? Interesting word, to tolerate the urge. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So this practical handbook, this map of bhakti, begins with our senses, our senses and our mind, and the power of regulating them. And so I wanted to just begin, before I even get back into each of these 6 individually. Why is it important? In other words, why would you have to do this? Regulate your senses. I think it's important to have a mature understanding of this, because like there's a few different ways of looking at spiritual life. One historical perspective is that, and this is found in any number of traditions, but just kind of like one idea of spiritual life is, if you believe in the right thing, that's enough, right? And another perspective is, it doesn't actually matter what you believe at all. It only matters how you live your life. And in the history of Christianity, this is called like the kind of like the balance between faith and works. What's in your heart, what you do about it. And so first of all, the Nectar of Instruction doesn't begin with like orthodoxy and belief systems and, oh, Krishna is like God and this is who you are. It doesn't do all that. The Nectar of Instruction is actually written for those who are convinced about the necessity to practice bhakti, that it is the religion of the soul. That's what we're made of. I'm made to give love and service. This is what makes me happy. And I'm aiming that at the supreme. The philosophy of that is given in Bhagavad Gita and other places. And if you look at the purports, Prabhupada does give us the framework of the philosophy. But here we're looking at the culture, the application. So right away we can see that like one idea that it doesn't matter how you live your life as long as you believe in the right thing is immediately rejected, because that's quite shallow. It's quite shallow to be like, I'm not sign on the dotted line. I'm one of the chosen people now, and like I'm saved. And again, that's not a function of any one tradition. This is a very natural shortcut that people take at different times in different places in different parts of the world under different umbrellas of belief systems. It's like, yeah, I'm good. I can just do whatever I want. And Prabhupada talks about this in the purport too, that sometimes people they'll know that they're asked to regulate their lives, and instead of doing that, they'll do whatever they want, and then they'll take like an opportunity for atonement, whether it's like the confessional or like some kind of pious activity to counteract bad karma. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, and I won't do it again, and please purify me or whatever, and then just go back to doing it again. And there's a whole section in the Srimad Bhagavatam that criticizes that mentality. So in other words, it does matter how we show up. It definitely matters how we show up. And the shortcut to kind of that whole faith versus works thing is that they both matter. It matters what's in your heart, and it matters that you try to apply that in your life. And the ultimate answer to why the Nectar of Instruction is arranged the way it is, with so much about practical application, isn't because if you don't live your life the way that the Supreme wants you to, you're a bad person, and you're like not able to enter, and you're like, you know, a demon or bad, or like you don't get into the special place or the heaven or whatever. It's not, none of these ideas. It's actually much more practical than that. If you can't control your mind, if you don't control your speech, if you're dominated by anger, you don't have any room for bhakti to grow in your heart. And there are many verses to this effect, that for somebody who is dominated by greedy desires, for somebody who is full of anger, for somebody who is pushed around, bullied by their senses, whose belly and tongue and genitals and mind are prodding them all the time, where is the question? It's a rhetorical question. Where is the question of bhakti arising and becoming steady in their heart and their lives? In other words, not really practical, not really possible. It's like you're trying to light a fire, right? You get yourself like you go find some dry kindling, find a dry place, cover up the stack it just so, smaller things, bigger things on top, and like maybe some paper at the bottom. Like you have a whole system. To start a fire is a big deal before, lighters and everything, right? Mm-hmm. And then you start trying to light the fire. You're protected from the wind. And what happens? Your other hand sneaks in and starts pouring water over the fire while you're lighting it. Like, come on. We're trying to set our hearts on fire for Krishna. And this is our birthright. We're capable of this. And it's not like finger wagging. It's not like, oh, you're bad, you're this, to say you need to control your mind, or we have the opportunity to like regulate our speech. It's like, if you don't do that, you're pouring water while you're trying to light a fire. You're going to waste so much time. It's going to be frustrating. So it's way beyond thinking about spirituality as if the way your life doesn't matter. And it's also beyond the idea that, yeah, your life matters, but only because that's what God wants from you. It's like, yeah, but that's also because if you don't happen to line up with the way the universe works, you're going to be trying to swim against the current. If you're full of anger, how do you have love for God? How do you have love for anything? It's like, we're going to talk about these things. So does that make sense? Very practical, extremely practical. And this is why it's the religion of the soul. Like, everybody has to deal with anger. Everybody has to deal with the mind. Everybody has to deal with the urge to like say whatever, just like blah, blah, blah. Everyone has to deal with like the desire to taste things, and like that can run the show. And if it does, it gets in the way of our higher nature, our bhakti nature, our actual spiritual nature. So this is what Rupa Goswami is trying to protect us from. This is why it's a map. It's like, okay, here's the path. Over there is a swamp. Over there is a cliff. And at the bottom of the cliff is some pointy rocks. And here's the path. And here's how you like, watch out. This is going to show up. It's going to be like, there's some highwaymen here, some robbers. They're going to try and steal from you. The thief of anger is going to try to steal your peace of mind, you could say. So a good map will have these things. to protect us. Does that make sense? This is why it's arranged the way it is. So we talked a little bit about the urge to speak, a little bit. We'll hear from Srila Prabhupada now. He says in the purport, every one of us has the power of speech. As soon as we get an opportunity, we begin to speak. Notably, the ability to speak is one of the things that sets apart humans from non-humans, right? Like to have the capacity to actually express thought that way is a really, really powerful and rare thing, relatively speaking. Like there's just so many species that can't do it. They can communicate in different ways, but it's much more rudimentary. They don't have the ability to speak about the divine or their spiritual nature so much. So Prabhupada's talking. If we do not speak about Krishna consciousness, we speak about all sorts of nonsense. A toad in a field speaks by croaking. And similarly, everyone who has a tongue wants to speak, even if all he has to say is nonsense. So there's an expression. They had nothing to say, and then they said it. So a fool is discovered as soon as they open their mouth, right? The contents of the mind and the heart are revealed as soon as one opens the mouth. And this is the proof. So sometimes we find in some spiritual traditions, you're advised to practice mauna vrata. Prabhupada talks about this, complete silence. The purpose of such a thing is to not talk about silly things. So right now we live in a culture where we have social media and we have like full permission to just talk about anything all the time. And it's very glorified as like a self-empowerment thing. So I can just talk about whatever I want. Like here's, my opinion about something. It doesn't matter if it's a good opinion, if it's well-formed, if it's mature, if it's educated or intelligent. We're just given platforms to share our opinions about everything. And the perspective of bhakti is that just because you have something doesn't mean you should use it indiscriminately. So the whole idea is to regulate. Prabhupada talks in the purport here, he says, controlling speech does not mean self-imposed silence, as impersonalist or Mayavadi philosophers think. Silence may appear helpful for some time, but ultimately it proves a failure. Why? Because we're made to speak. Otherwise we would just be like dogs and rabbits. We wouldn't have the capacity of the human body. We're wasting it if we don't actually speak. The meaning of controlled speech conveyed by Srila Rupa Goswami advocates the positive process of Krishna Katha, engaging the speaking process in glorifying Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord. The tongue can thus glorify the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord. That is the significance of controlling the urge to speak. So this is a pattern we're going to find very much in the Nectar of Instruction, that just like the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is like in so much anxiety about, okay, I can't do this whole fighting thing because it's not going to make me happy. And Krishna's whole thing is stop thinking about trying to make yourself happy and start thinking about using who you are, what you're good at in service. So similarly, it's not that we're not supposed to talk. If that was the case, I'd be a hypocrite number one right now. We're supposed to talk, and we're going to talk. It's a very refined faculty of humanity. We're supposed to use it, but we're supposed to understand its power, right? Prabhupada gives the example, when you're asleep, the last sense that remains awake is your hearing. It's the one that can wake you up. That's why we have alarm clocks, right? Not alarm scratch and sniff stickers. We have, or even alarm lights, alarm clocks, because sound is very powerful. We're very sensitive to it. And so the reciprocal of hearing sound is making sound, specifically making words, conveying meaning that way, ideas. And so we have a great deal of power there. So what we express, and similarly what we allow into our ears, determines our consciousness and the consciousness of people around us. And so it's a sober responsibility. And so Vachavega means the urge to speak indiscriminately, right? Because it's a great privilege to speak. So we see it takes a lot of practice. You see babies, they have to try really hard, make a lot of noise, form those vowels and consonants. And just to be able to get an alphabet together, it takes years of practice, incredible development of the brain, so much fine motor control. Actually, the finest muscle control in the body is around the lips and tongue, because they can actually form all these wonderful sounds. Pa, 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 ma, ka, 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 ka. All these wonderful sounds that we can take for granted when we're adults. But they're actually incredibly fine, very, very refined thing. But as soon as we have it, as soon as you have something, it's very easy to take it for granted and just like, you feel like saying something, so you say it. Rupa Goswami is saying, hold on. Be discriminating. Ascertain whether this is for the benefit of others. We heard about this in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17. Krishna talks about the austerities of speech, you may remember. He says, the austerity of speech means to speak words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not disturbing to others, and also to speak in line with spiritual vibration, like to share mantras, to share spiritual, to share scripture. That's always considered pure. So this is a benchmark. This is a practical benchmark. It's like, before I say something, is it the truth? Like, how many of these boxes does it tick off? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it pleasing? Is it, what else is there? Let me look up the verse before I take it for granted here. This is from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse like 15 or so. Is in fact verse 15, yeah. Words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and either reciting scripture or spiritual sound vibration, or in line with it. How many of these 5 things am I ticking off, right? This is why I personally, like, what I do when someone sneezes, I'll just say Hare Krishna, because it's like, you know, actually even in the English language we say bless you, it's short for God bless you. The idea is that, like, you know, I caught you in a moment of tiny vulnerability when you're sneezing, and I'm just asking the Lord to protect you in this little kind of hiccup you have in your body. So I just say Hare Krishna in any situation like that, because it's a spiritual sound vibration. And especially when I'm with devotees, they understand like where I'm coming from. It's like, it's beneficial, it's in line with spiritual sound vibration, it's truthful, and hopefully it's pleasing. So
I'm trying to say now, Achyuta.
Achyuta. Yeah, right. We say Achu in
Achyuta is
English.
another name for Krishna.
Achyuta is a name for Krishna, he who does not fall down. Sounds like a sound of a sneeze. Achyuta. Achyuta. That's cute. So this is practical. Instead of just speaking because we can, just posting because we can, just taking a selfie or putting on Instagram or whatever, or sharing our opinion unsolicited, uneducated, asking ourselves these questions. Is it truthful? Like, do I actually know the truth of a situation before I open my mouth? If I don't, at least we can say, you know, I don't know for sure, but and give your opinion. That's at least honest. What we find in today's world is like, it's like this. Why is it like that? Because I said so. We don't present our qualifications or disqualifications, and therefore it's no longer honest. It's no longer an honest presentation of the truth. It's like, actually, I don't know. I haven't studied this, but I think like this. That would be a more honest presentation, for example. And you find when you speak that way, when you force yourself, force means you try to practice speaking in these ways, the mind also becomes regulated. The mind becomes peaceful. There's less anger, there's less ego. You get more in sattva, because you're voluntarily aligning yourself with what's truthful, with what's beneficial, like thinking about, okay, maybe this is the truth, but are they ready to hear it? If they're not ready to hear it, am I trying to force medicine down somebody's throat who's not going to swallow? Always a tricky act, like, wow, yeah, they need to hear this, but can they from me? How can I say it in the way that they can actually receive it? How can I sugarcoat the pill so they swallow it, right? This is what thoughtful people do. This is actually what spiritually minded people do. Srila Prabhupada also had to do this, particularly one-on-one. We find in his classes to audiences and his purports, he could be much more direct because that's the platform he's on, and he has to give the highest level. At some point, he has to give that so we can know where to aim. But we see in his one-on-one conversations where he would assess where the person is at He would sometimes give relative instructions. He would give incentives. He would use sweet words. He would use humor, different things. For example, he at one point, just off the top of my head, this is so many examples, but one young lady approached Srila Prabhupada, and she had a number of negative interactions with men in her life. She felt very unhappy with the quality of the character of men around her and in the world. And she said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm so tired of worshiping Krishna. He's the man. And, like that, I just, she was very dissatisfied. And she expressed like this, and he could understand her heart. He could understand that this is a sincere person. Circumstantially, their life has been full of being disappointed in the form of men. Did he say, did he start like laying down the law with her or whatever? No, his response was, it is okay. Srimati Radharani is even more important than Krishna. The divine feminine is even more important than divine masculine. Trying to encourage her, right? It's not false. It's kind of massaging the truth to give her something that would be pleasing enough she could hear it and stay in the game, right? So this is what an expert does, is when they're one-on-one, is like, how can I tick as many of these boxes as possible, right? Like the overriding concern for him is, I don't want this person to walk out the door. I want them to stay here because I love them and I care about them and I know this is what they need. So I'm willing to speak in this way to get them to stay. And I'm not going to speak in some other ways that would quickly usher them out of the door and off of their bhakti practice. That is truth in that situation, right? So it's a very fine thing. What is truthful? What is beneficial, actually? And this meditation of how can I help others? This is very purifying. If we live our life in this way, it's like, how can what I have to say be of service to others? This question is very powerful and very empowering. Also in the 17th chapter, one of the sections on the austerities of the mind, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport there, 1716, Bhagavad Gita, the mind can be controlled by always thinking how to do good for others, right? So in this verse of Nectar of Instruction, we have the manasavega. The second urge is the manasavega, the urge of the mind. Mind has so many different things going on. And Srila Prabhupada has already given us one piece of support, is that the mind can become our friend by thinking how to do good for others, right? Actually, this already came up in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna said the mind is, chapter 6, restless, turbulent, obstinate, crazy, very strong. And to control it, my dear Krishna, I think is more difficult than controlling the wind. And if you look at the list of things in this verse, after the mind is anger. Anger is actually a subset of the mind. It's such an important subset that it gets its own category. We'll talk about that in a second, but the mind is such an important thing, all important. In many ways, yoga is the art of making the mind your friend. The whole yogic system is the art of getting your mind to be your friend and engage in what's helpful and beneficial. Because if it's not, it is so powerful, so degrading that it can take us anywhere else. So yeah, one point is try to think about how to do good for others. That comes up in Bhagavad Gita. Now, I'll pause here. We talked a little bit about the urge to speak. We talked about not giving up these senses, but engage them in a higher way. Did anything stand out that you want to explore, reflect back at this point, Caitlin?
So many things.
So many things.
I would love to start though.
That's using your urge to speak properly.
Thank you. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is knowing to do as many as possible. As is it true, is it pleasing, is it beneficial, all of those things, doing as many as possible. Is there a way in which to look at this through a hierarchy, or are they all sort of like even keel and they should all be considered?
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that.
Okay.
I could look into some of the commentaries on that verse in Bhagavad Gita, maybe some of the previous acharyas have given like more of a breakdown of like, because how do you know, what's the order of operations? Which one do you
There
try to
is
apply
one, right.
first? Yeah. I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it's a topic that I'm sure the acharyas have talked about. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but it's challenging,
And
isn't it?
that's the thing that I think I'm trying to wrap my head around of like, because there are so many different pieces of this, is that like, if I were to just take one of these aspects, I could focus on one aspect for like a year and then like go to the next one and then just like add them on top of each other. Like that's how my brain is like trying to be like, oh, and then I immediately go to the one that feels the most difficult to me, of the one that is not agitating to others. And I think that one's really interesting because I love how you brought up 1716 and how to control the mind through doing good through others or good for others. And I think that's also something that I'm trying to reframe how like agitation comes up. And I think that also in this verse we talk about anger, and that's something that I'm like trying to understand a little bit more of like that relationship, because I also struggle with like, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I think of things that are not agitating to others, or how to control my mind to doing good for others, but also not sacrificing my
Right.
truth, you know, like
Yeah.
how that balance is. So is there a different way, perhaps, instead of focusing on agitating to others, is it like better to, or different to focus on controlling the mind in that way?
Controlling the mind in what way?
In the way of thinking of it not as agitating to others, but instead of doing good for others.
Yeah. The exact Sanskrit for the verse in the Bhagavad Gita begins anudvega karang vakyam. Again, this word vega, non creating a pushing, not creating a pushing in other people. Prabhupada translated this as not agitating. And the other word is hitam, beneficial. Hita means for your benefit. So yeah, one's the negative and one's the positive. Not agitating, beneficial. In general, in our philosophy and in life, it's much more practical to focus on the positive, because you can't conceive of a negative as clearly, right? If one were to go around thinking like, I can't step on people's toes, I don't want to agitate people, that can lead to like weird behavior. It can lead to like, oh, I should not say anything here, even when you should, because it's focusing on a negative. In general, if you're trying to do good for others, that's better than trying not to do bad. And if you're trying to be of benefit to others and you cause some agitation, it's better that way than you didn't say anything at all, because you tried to do benefit and the intention matters. And generally, unless you're completely off the mark, you did more benefit than you did agitation anyway, right? And our philosophy is all about the positive. You know, if you want to get rid of lower things, you don't just like talk about the lower things forever and like beat yourself up about it. You get the higher thing and you'll naturally let go of the lower thing. So what we're advised to do is to try to understand what the highest benefit is for others. See them as a spiritual unit of consciousness. Learn how to deal with them that way. There's a science. The science of Krishna consciousness includes the science and culture of how to deal with other people, the spiritual units. Like actually what we're doing by having kirtan in public all over the world, that's spiritual culture. Because we know, and if we don't know, our teachers know, that everyone's a spiritual unit of consciousness. And having free, easy access to spiritual sound vibration is beneficial for them. Our teachers know. We may know, the public may not know, but it's a fact. Therefore, that is actually an activity of welfare. It's actually an activity of welfare. Now, somebody may hear it and be like, oh my God, those Hare Krishnas. Give me a break. You know? Do we stop for them? No. It may be agitating for them. It may be agitating. However, it's in service to the highest benefit. So in that example, that's one kind of example of this principle, is like, we have to make it our business to know what is good for everybody in a general sense, not like, you know, I know what's good for you, but like generally, what does the soul need? Who are they? Beyond all of the things that we don't know, that are just temporarily true about their body and mind, which we respect and which we're open to hearing, but what is essentially true about everybody, and how can I deal with them on that level? And what we find is that in this tradition and in every tradition, saintly people who have achieved a significant level of spiritual standing, they see other people that way. They deal with them that way, and people feel that, you know? When people met Srila Prabhupada, they routinely said, I felt like he could see me. I felt like he could understand what was in my heart. I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt accepted. These are experiences of dealing with a saintly person in any tradition, because it's a fact. They understand your nature. They deal in that way. So what we're doing here in these classes is trying to pick up the theory and learn, like, okay, well, what is the self? And how do I deal with these little spiritual units floating around in the universe, you know, in male and female and non-binary bodies and non-human bodies? How do I deal with them? How do I do that? And trying to connect all of them to Krishna in our hearts, and therefore in our words, is the culture. That's where it's at. So it starts with, you know, thinking of them as spiritual, and then it continues into like talking to them as if they're spiritual and acting as if they're spiritual. Like, what would you do if you knew that the person you're talking to is very dear to the Lord, that they belong to the Supreme Lord? They're an eternal part of them. They're eternally conscious unit of sensitive, conscious energy. How would you deal with them? So that question, you know, that becomes a conviction. It's like, and then the answers are there from within. And also there's more that our teachers have to say about that either I'm not remembering or is going to come to us as we study these books. Does that help?
100%. I feel like I have to watch this back and I'll get more, but thank you.
Okay.
Can I mention something?
Yes, you can.
As everyone has already or will read the purport, for this verse and for many of the verses, there Prabhupada will speak in ways about like not speaking gossip or what's called like village talk.
Right.
Right. And he'll talk about just speaking about Krishna consciousness, like in Krishna Katha, so like pastimes and stories of Krishna. And so we're obviously also speaking things that are not Krishna Katha on a daily basis. Everyone works and has other relationships and people that don't practice bhakti and all of those types of things.
Right.
So I just wanted to invite you to maybe like put that in context a little bit.
Sure.
For everyone. And
yeah.
You did explain here a little bit of like also speaking or keeping in mind a spiritual vibration when we're communicating, but what it means, like how we can take the literal things that he's saying and make it apply to us.
Absolutely. Sometimes on walks, Srila Prabhupada is very fond of walks. He had a heart attack at one point, and the doctor said, "You're spending too much time praying and sitting. You should get some exercise." And Prabhupada thought, well, he doesn't know about praying and chanting, but he's right about the exercise. And from that day forward, he took brisk walks every morning. And one of the phenomena of his walks is that he would meet people where they're at. Literally, he would just walk across the city and he would see people. And sometimes he would say Hare Krishna, and sometimes he would say, "Hello, how are you? How are you doing? How was your day?" And he would get to know them, and he would talk about their lives, and it was apparently very mundane. So when Srila Prabhupada says that the tongue is meant for engaging in spiritual sound vibration, we're not meant to take that in a naive sense, that if you're in the world and you have a dharma, a duty to be in the world, you also have some responsibilities to say things to the cashier, to the tax man, to the police officer, to your neighbor, and whoever else. This is natural. So the way to reconcile it is first of all, through experience. When we read and recite spiritual literature, when we chant Hare Krishna, Kirtan, and Japa, we're meant to, by applying ourselves in that, get the experience of like, wow, this is different. This is like categorically different than sitting around talking about, you know, the latest episode of that TV show or whatever, right? And that evidence that we get is meant to help us to aim our lives, that I want to get to a point where I can experience this sound vibration more and more, and to be selective and deliberate in choosing what we say and when and to whom. And it doesn't mean we're never going to talk about so-called mundane things, but like the word trivia, you know, this word trivia, trivial things, insignificant, comes from Latin. Tri means three, via means street. The trivia is the place where three streets meet. The Romans were great at building roads. Wherever they built these roads, sometimes the roads would meet at meeting points. What do you get at meeting points? You get a little village meetup, you know, water cooler joint kind of place. People would get there and they talk about trivial things. How are your goats doing this year? They're all right. How are your sheep? Yeah. Did you hear about that person? They're cheating on their husband. No, really? No, let me tell you about them. Trivial. You got nothing else to do. Water cooler talk, right? And this is just, it happened with the Romans. It happens with us. It's just like getting together and indulging in things that are insubstantial. And there's this beautiful invention called the internet, which is like practically, you know, carte blanche for as much trivia as you want. And so we don't need to go out of our way to cultivate lower forms of speech, because there's infinite opportunities. Our material culture that surrounds us is incredibly empowering. Like if you want to find any bit of information, you can look online, like go to Wikipedia alone and find pieces of information that it took scholars like so much time to find 100 years ago, just like that. What to speak of like really trivial information you can also find very, very quickly. Gossip. So that's not a problem. We don't have to cultivate that. We do have to try to cultivate the higher vibration, because we're in that world where we're given so much facility to cultivate the lower vibration. So it's not that we're not going to engage in talking about material things. It's that when we do, we know it's for a purpose. It's purposeful. It's not without a goal, you know? When Srila Prabhupada would say hello to people, he would look at them and see them as a spirit soul. Hello, how are you? And he would deal with them that way. And for him, that was a Krishna conscious experience. And I'm pretty sure it was for them too. And maybe it would lead somewhere with them. Often it wouldn't. That was the extent of their interaction. And then he would keep walking. But it was an extension of his Krishna consciousness, and it was chosen, it was deliberate. And so similarly, we have the opportunity with our higher intelligence to decide, okay, is this a situation where like I'm being dragged by my lower nature or someone else's lower nature into gossip to lower like idle, trivial stuff? Or is it like part of the social lubricant of the situation where I'm expected to have a certain amount of, you know, like I was at the grocery store today, right? And there was a young man working the register, and cashiers have the most boring job in the world. Bless him. He was trying to be like really a go-getter and have conversations with everybody. I saw it with two people in line in front of me. So it came to my turn. And of course, asks me, how are you? This and that. Do you have a club card number? And I said, I don't, my fiance does. Is that okay? He said, yeah. So I give the number. And he says, how'd you meet your fiance? And I said, well, it's an interesting story. I was a Hare Krishna monk, and this and that. And one of the monks, people I've been a monk with, you know, he connected us when we weren't monks anymore, and had a little exchange with him. So it was like a thing. I'm at the grocery store. I'm at the cash register. I'm not going to be like, I don't see you. I don't talk to you. I don't know you, because that's just rude. You know, I could have just continued chanting Hare Krishna in my mind or with my lips, but I chose to engage with. And you know what? He asked me a question. Let me slip the word Hare Krishna in. So bonus. And also, while I was in line and nothing else was happening, I was just chanting to myself. I was doing that because there's literally nothing else to do. It's that or magazines. pretty sure I made a good choice. So, we use our discrimination. And so, yeah, there are going to be situations where it's like you're in the world, function as if you're in the world. And dealing with people as if they matter is also what devotees do, because they do matter. They matter to us and they matter to Krishna. However, like Prabhupada wouldn't sit around and like shoot the breeze for forever with somebody about trivial things. He would help them feel safe and seen and heard. And if they were open, he would share something. And if they weren't, he would wish them well. Maybe he would distribute some prasad to them or whatever, and he would continue on his way. But he was a man on a mission. So it depends on our qualification too. Right? When I was a monk, I had more of a kind of like a license to be a little more aloof. License to be a little bit more, I don't really go there. Don't need to know about the latest. I didn't know about TV shows and movies between the years 2014 and 2020. I wasn't aware what came out. Didn't pay attention. I knew that, who won the election. I knew the big things that came to my doorstep. But other than that, I was like, don't need to know about that. And it was great. It's a wonderful experience. And I can't live like that anymore because it's not my dharma. I'm not a monk. I have to be in the world more. But I can choose to not dwell on trivial things and talk about trivial things and put it in my ears and let it come out of my mouth. And so when we talk about things that are more mundane, we can ask ourselves, am I doing this purposefully, or is it an urge? I think of the word urge is like, you don't have control over an urge. It pokes you, do this, poke, 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 poke. It's like, do I say this because I feel impelled to say it? Or is my higher self like, yeah, let's have a conversation here. Those are two very different things. They may look the same, they may sound the same, but they're not. And I would suggest even the quality of the sound vibration is different when one is purposeful versus when one is impelled and acting on an urge. Does that make sense?
And that applies to all of the urges they're speaking. Like, is this purposeful?
Yes.
Or am I being controlled by it?
It is. It applies to all of them. I give the example, like, I have a client I work with one-on-one. I'm a coach, as well, and they're working on regulating their eating, which we're going to get to. This is in this verse: regulate your eating. And so, for them, victory wasn't just, I'm not going to have sweets ever. Like they had a problem with sweets. Victory for them was, at this point in my life, I'm going to decide ahead of time how much I can have under guidance. And when I'm like having a tough day, I'll have some sweets, but I'll have it purposefully, saying, okay, you know what? Today's a tough one, and I'm going to have some, but no more than this, not beyond these hours, of this quality only. And yeah, that's what I'm good with right now. And that was purposeful. It was conscious. And by following that, they experienced it was fundamentally different than like just, practically without even realizing it, being like, I'm just making this up, but like, finding yourself halfway through a tub of ice cream before you're like, oh my goodness, what am I even doing? That's not purposeful. That's being pushed by the urges of the tongue. And so we may have a sweet tooth or whatever. And so we can regulate that, which means that we purposefully, consciously choose when and how we're going to indulge. Maybe if it's your birthday, someone makes you a cake, you can be like, okay, I'm going to have some cake. Special day. Not going to say no, you made a cake for me, but I'm not going to have like 3 slices. It's purposeful. It applies to everything in life, for sure. Yeah. Are you the boss or are you the slave? Are you being pushed, or are you like, I'll allow it within this regulation? Any more comments, questions, reflections before we continue?
Just when you think of, we're talking about, in the world, as I was just visiting my family in Connecticut, my mother had, she gets People magazine, and the cover of People magazine, Taylor Swift, it says, she's on top of the world. And we were all having a laugh. But I said, I can guarantee one thing, she's not going to stay on top of the world, because that's just the nature of reality. She's you know, she's subject to old age, sickness, and death. And it was just a way to, you know, kind of said it in a joking way,
Yeah.
but it was a way to talk to people in the world, which without being too heavy-handed about it, but you know, in a lighthearted way.
Yeah.
Right.
Or Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that Paurusham Nrushu 7:11 or 12. He says, I am the ability in humans. If you see somebody with some wonderful ability, like if you can appreciate Taylor Swift singing, or this person's that, or this person's this, it's like, yeah, that's amazing. Wow, I can't do that. I can't score goals like Leo Messi does in a soccer field. That's powerful, you know? And you can talk about it even a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, wow, that was amazing. And if you do it in a mode of like, look how Krishna has empowered this person. That's different than being pushed to talk about something because of like the lower modes of nature. Is you can consciously choose, like, yeah, I can connect this situation to Krishna. Or like you're saying, connect this person to their life path. Like, yeah, they're passing through. What an incredible, you know, journey we're on, that somebody can be on top of the world for some time. And their 15 minutes is longer than 15 minutes, but it's also temporary. And they're also a spirit soul. Yeah. Thank you. Any other reflections before we continue, or questions from our online crew? No. Okay.
I had a quick thought, just a quick one. It's really fascinating how you were talking about just like the hearing is the opposite of like sound, right? So you make sound, and then your hearing, your sense of hearing is the last to diminish when you're sleeping. It was thinking, made me think about, I work with a lot of individuals with differences in their abilities.
Yeah.
And it made me think about the kids with autism that I work with, who often will get really loud when there's too much noise around them. And so if there's too much noise around them, then they find comfort in their own voices. And I feel like that's really very consistent with our internal places. So whether we're dysregulated from a sensory place, or we are having too much going on with our mind, that it's quick for us to go to that place of like talk, 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 being that croaking frog, like really sharing our voices in a way that's not super intentional.
Right.
And I just thought that like it's really fascinating to think about these connections in that way. And I guess my question for you is, in that situation, and imagine it happens to all of us, but like when you're so in your process and you're so in your experience, and you sometimes can't see that you're in that place where your mind is really active and going, and you're less intentional with your word and with your voice. What's a nice strategy for us as people living human experiences to be able to fall back on, to start to notice?
So if I'm understanding your question,
Yeah.
you're asking, like, based on the fact that we can and do get into a place where we're acting more out of impulse, speaking indiscriminately, what tools can I offer that can help us recognize that that's happening?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess one thing is what I experienced when I started taking up a japa practice. The japa practice is the deliberate use of our tongue in the highest sound vibration, purposefully, repeatedly, for some stretch of time, right? And it's actually incredibly purifying that way. So I guess reflecting back, I experienced the japa sadhana, or practice of japa, being like the place to feel what it's like to be completely purposeful. Not just like choosing what I say. Like, I was kind of a stickler for pronunciation. I really wanted to get every mantra out. It's nice to hear all the syllables of the mantra. That's good. It's good to do that. And then at a higher level, like beyond just like posture, pronunciation, you have the other P, prayer, like really chanting in a prayerful mood where you're not just saying the words, you're really calling out to the Supreme. I need you. Please be in my heart. Please let me remember you, you know? Please help me mend my relationship with you. Please help me to remember you in my life. And this is like a very, very purposeful action. This is a deeply purposeful action mediated by the tongue. It apparently is just a matter of the tongue and lips and air. It's not, it's actually from the heart. But by doing that purposefully in the morning, as much as I could, like before my day, if possible, I found that I could experience what it's like to be purposeful because I was doing it in the highest way that I could for some time. And then I'm asking for help, right? I'm asking for support. And so then the rest of the day, like I was working, I was in connection with other people, and I had a reference point then. I had a reference point of what it's like to be coming from, because when you're in japa, you know, you have full permission to turn off all other, like your phone is off, your laptop is closed, there's no conversations happening, there's no other sound vibrations, it's just you and Krishna's name. And the reason for that is that you can get that reference point of this is what it's like to be fully intentional with my speech, fully intentional. And when your mind starts to wander, you like bring it back, and you're even for a syllable, you're fully there. You'll feel it for the rest of your day. And so when you start to slip, you will notice because you have the reference point. If you don't have a reference point, you don't know where, you know. There's an expression, if you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there, right? You don't have a reference point, you're wandering, everything's the same, up is down, left is right. It doesn't matter where you go. You could be into a ditch, you could be in heaven, you wouldn't tell the difference. You have to have a reference point. You have to have some higher context. So when it comes to speech, hear the speech of persons who are very elevated. Chant sincere rounds and ask for help in your chanting. And then in your life, you'll feel the difference, like between that and then like your normal kind of like high level, but still basically like not pure chanting, but kind of high level moment to moment speech. And then like you're, oh, I'm getting down into the zone of like, yeah, now we're talking about the television show. And now I just cussed out somebody for cutting me off in traffic. Like you'll feel like transcendence, goodness, passion, ignorance. You'll feel that. Some mixtures, you know. So the short answer is get yourself a reference point, and the long answer is experience. The other thing is, if you surround yourself with people who you trust and you give them permission to call you out on it lovingly, then you win, because you get a lot of benefit by being around, especially devotees. When I was in an ashram, like that was our life. Like someone would be like, bro, you're just jibber jabbering. They would say it, you know, in some joking way.
With bro.
They would say bro. They said bro.
They said, Prabhu,
Bravo.
come on, you know? And you'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. Because you sign up for that. And it's a great benefit. And if you don't have that, get it. Get yourself a sangha of people. We all have a sangha here. And marry yourself a devotee. Get friends with a devotee.
Marry yourself a devotee.
Yeah. Amanda and Corey know. And then they can keep you in line lovingly. It's like you sign up for it. It's like, you know what? When I start to get down that road, can you like please just let me know that I'm getting there? Because other people can feel it. You can feel it in other people, right? Especially if you're up here. If it starts to go down here, you can feel it. It's harder with ourselves because we're, you know, it's closer to us. We can't see it. So if you have that little mirror, the little walking mirror in the form of other devotees, they'll be like, hey, I love you, but watch out. You're kind of getting out of your lane a little bit here. You're right. Thank you. Does that help?
Can I mention something?
Yeah.
One was I wanted to just underscore why it's important to actually make your japa audible. I think you highlighted like, really why that's important, so that we are hearing the sound vibration. So it's not just saying it in our minds.
Yeah.
Not just saying it silently. It's like you I think just really showed a prime example of why it's so important, even if it's a whisper, that you can hear it. Right. And so because you're also practicing being so purposeful with speech, with your speech. So that, and then in regards to everything you're just saying, and the last thing you were talking about, you can feel it in someone else. And so if you can start to tune into how to what you're feeling when you notice, maybe you don't notice that your mouth is running and your diarrhea of the mouth, or saying things that are unintentional, but you can tune into, okay, what's physiologically happening in my body?
Yeah.
If I'm hot, if I'm like clenched,
Right.
like sort of similar to the stress response.
Yeah.
That can be an indicator. Oh, I need to take a breath, and like, what am I actually saying right now? And maybe like pause.
Yeah, like we're gonna get to Krota, anger. Prabhupada talks about how anger pollutes the chest and the eyes and something. And like if you feel in your body what it's like to experience anger, there's a heating, there's a constriction, and if you know, like you don't have to necessarily be able to describe that, but you can feel it. And so when you feel that start to happen, you can understand anger is creeping in, right? And then you can ask yourself, am I using my temper or losing my temper? Most of the time we're losing our temper. So that's a good shortcut, is like, what is the body telling me? Like I know for myself, when I start to get agitated and annoyed with people, I can feel it in my body, and then they can hear it in my voice as soon as I open my mouth. So there is a hint. There's a hint there before, because I can actually feel it before I say anything. So if I'm like a little bit patient before I open my mouth, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm actually annoyed right now. Then I can consciously tone it down and chill before I let the sound come out of my mouth. Another thing you can do, if you're really into this, if you really want to get analytical, is record yourself. Record yourself. Like you can record yourself chanting japa if you want to see if you're hitting all the syllables. You can also record yourself in conversation and see like, what is it like when I get off course? When I start to like, usually we'll talk faster, our pitch changes, there's some cues, but we don't do this. We don't actually record ourselves. It's really uncomfortable hearing yourself talk in a recording, but you could do it. I've recorded my japa just to see like if I was catching all the syllables way back. It was like shudder inducing, but I did it and then I adjusted. So that's like an option, just saying.
Is that helpful for Mel?
Mel, was that helpful?
Yeah, I think it just was great to hear the summary. I think we all need to hear it. I know that life is hard. So thank you.
It is hard. We have a lot of responsibilities and we have to use our speech in different ways. Yeah. We talked about the mind as well a little bit. I talked about like the mind can be purified by trying to think of what's good for others. Just talk a little more about the mind before we wrap up for today. So Srila Prabhupada also talks in the Bhagavad Gita about how if we are hearing regularly Vedic literature, Bhakti literature, it purifies the mind. Like hearing Bhagavad Gita, hearing the pastimes of Krishna. And he says there's an unlimited stock of spiritual literature, and to hear that is very purifying for the mind. So this is an experience. Like we could be doing anything with this time. We could be talking about anything, but we're all actually not just talking and hearing. We're applying our minds deliberately in the subject matter of controlling our senses for the sake of purifying our bhakti and keeping our spiritual life center and having more spiritual vibration in our life, basically. So all of that mental application, all that mental force that we're applying, listening to this or re-listening to it, thinking about it, that's actually very purifying. It's deliberate use of intelligence for the purpose of lifestyle management, for the purpose of directing myself to Krishna. So whether it's like hearing, just actually hearing or reading a book, or thinking about how to apply these spiritual concepts in our lives, those are both very purifying. Like you can like just read in a very receptive mode, where you can think about like, wow, okay, and then have a conversation about it or take notes or kind of ponder. And both of those things are very purifying for the mind. Those are two things about the mind. Also, we heard in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, when Arjuna said that it's more difficult than controlling the wind, this mind. What does Krishna say? Does he say, hey, you're right, forget about it, don't even try? No, he says you can do it with two things. Anyone remember what those two things were? He said you could do it with two things. Control the mind with suitable practice and detachment. Suitable practice and detachment. So suitable practice means we receive the practice that's given by Krishna and by his devotees. For example, chanting japa. For example, hearing these books. And there's what's called abhyas, repetition. We chant not just one mantra, we give it a few goes because the mind gets purified by that. Like we're actually getting so many repetitions of commercials and so many repetitions of street signs and there's like a mayoral election happening right now in Vermont. So there's like little mayoral signs every few yards. Repetition's part of life. Anything you repeat, you get better at. You want to go to the gym and work out, you don't just do one rep. You do a bunch. So we repeat the mantra. We repeat our practice daily. And also within each day, we also repeat, like I chant the mantra more than once. I chant it a certain amount. And so that's a suitable practice, qualitatively and quantitatively in line with what's given to us. We don't make up our own practice. And the other thing is detachment. Don't take your mind so seriously. When one practices, one starts to see the difference between themselves and their mind, right? So when Arjuna is saying the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, crazy, very strong, he's not saying I'm restless, turbulent, obstinate, crazy, and very strong. He's saying there's a difference. I'm seeing the mind. That's already advancement. Because when you're really dominated by the mind, you think it's you. You're like, someone says something at you, you get angry, and there's no pause. There's no moment at which you're like, oh, I could get angry here. Or I'm feeling myself beginning to become angry. Or I'm experiencing my body or mind transformed by anger. You're just like, I am angry. That's what I am. As far as I know, I've always been angry. In that moment, that's all you know. So vairagya, separation means like you can actually separate yourself from the mind. You can have some distance. You can experience the things that the mind is going through, and you can see that it's different from you, right? So like when you're chanting your japa and you're intentionally trying to chant and pay attention, you'll experience the mind start to do different things, right? Not just me. This is a universal experience. So when that happens, we apply the loving guidance of bringing it back, just like a parent will bring back the attention of their child, like, it's okay, come back right here. And you bring it back to the mantra. And when you do that, that's going to be helpful for the mind too, because you're seeing like, there's me over here with the mantra, and there's the mind over there reciting a commercial jingle from when I was 7 years old and thinking about chocolate fudge cake. And, and I'm over here and you're over there. And so just that alone is clarifying. And so that process of deliberately bringing the mind back to what the higher self has decided we're doing right now, that being the boss and lovingly bringing it back over and moment by moment, that is one of the practices that helps purify the mind and helps us in the long term to deal with the pushings of the mind. Because the only way that we can actually become free from these lower things is to actually become attracted to bhakti, attracted to Krishna. And the good news is that's entirely possible because he's all attractive. And the bad news is that we're coming at it with like so many lifetimes. So the mind is really like a rubber ball. It's all over the map. But by deliberately bringing it to our practice, connecting it to what we're doing, seeing it as separate from us, but guiding it gently back, becomes attracted more and more to spiritual sound vibration, to the Sangha of devotees, to prasad, to the deity, to kirtan, to the books, to the philosophy. Next thing you know, it's dealing with people as spiritual beings and thinking how to do good for them. And then you got yourself a really good friend in the mind, et cetera, et cetera. Those are some thoughts. And now I'll pause there, and we can take any reflections or comments or questions on anything that we talked about today. We basically talked about the first two urges, the speech and the mind, a little bit about anger, some stuff about the tongue, tasting, not much. We'll get into that later. But any reflections, you may speak now.
It's incredible. We're like partway through verse 1.
So much good stuff.
I have a reflection.
Yes.
I'm reminded of something from kind of like what Mel was asking about, how can we catch ourselves? And I think I was listening to a recording from our Bhagavad Gita class, and it was sort of that heady chapter where we're going into like the kind of like learning about like what not to do, or those parts of us that are less desirable. But Krishna speaking to us in a way, it's out of compassion of like, you have to know like of your natural condition and what we're not looking for in order to have like a base of like, so that you can aim in this direction.
Right.
And I think in that lecture you had said like there's no room for shame here, and that was one of the biggest hurdles for me personally with bhakti, and especially with my japa, was I was so ashamed of just the condition of my mind or my heart or my feelings. And just like over the time with reading about the Bhagavad Gita and even Nectar of Instruction, like for me, what I'm already experiencing being so helpful is to actually deeply understand the natural condition of our mind as spirit souls, and then also materially.
Right.
And it's said in this chapter too, or around the first verse, maybe it was the preface, that I remember I wrote down that we are actually like misdirected, and our job is to keep redirecting ourselves. And that just was like so validating and gave me so much permission to continue to keep stepping back.
Yeah.
Because what I can observe and witness isn't actually me, but it's my current experience of myself. And if I trust that this will change in following this sort of prescription, then it really dissolves so much shame and angst around, why am I feeling this way? How can this be X, Y, Z, whatever? It kind of really makes it not so dramatic.
Thank you.
Really helpful.
And very universal. I think everybody is going through that really in their practice. And it's, if one approaches in that humble and honest way where one can take side by side, like me at my best, and like the philosophy explaining like my true self, and also like what happened, where I'm at when I'm like, being dragged around the lower modes of nature, what I actually like, how I'm misled. It creates so much compassion for ourselves and for others. And that's another way to really make the mind a friend, because when we really see people in terms of our own experience, I mean, Krishna even says this in the 6th chapter, Atma pamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yojuna sukham vagadiva dukkam sayogi paramomataha. The best yogi is the one who can see everybody by comparison to their own experience. That when one becomes truly like able to grapple with their own demons, their own lower nature, and see that I'm actually like a blissful spiritual being, and I've put myself in a situation to become confused and distracted and everything else, and I'm taking the medicine, then when they see someone else confused or angry or depressed or addicted to so many different kinds of things, the response is compassion. Because, oh my goodness, there's like what I would be doing or was doing if it weren't for this, very purifying. This is what they could also do. They could also transcend that. Right now they're misled, they're alone, they're lost, they don't have any better options. This is what they're doing. Wow, you know? And then, but you can see that soul in there. That's spiritual vision. That's compassion. And so it starts at home. You know, if we can't be compassionate with ourselves, then we don't get to have that experience seeing it in everyone else too. But we have full permission to hold that space for ourselves and see, like, it's actually Krishna's gift to show us, like, yeah, you know, you're capable of this and you're capable of that, but this is who you really are. And understand, you know, just like a good parent has compassion for their child because they know what it's like to be restless and childish and like no attention span, and to not have the answers in life and to like have a surplus of energy. They don't blame them for that. They don't blame them for spilling and making a mess and doing, they're like, they know, I've been there 40 years ago or whatever, I was you. But they also know the higher way, so they can hold that space. So if we can be loving for ourselves, loving guides and parents for ourselves, then we can also do that for others. And then you're looking at like a lifetime occupation, because there's people everywhere. There's little conditioned souls all over the universe. And everywhere you go, if you look at them like that, you got yourself another Krishna conscious experience right there, one-on-one with every single. That's a full-time occupation. You'll never get bored. So thank you. Any other reflections, comments, or questions? Anya.
Yeah. I just love the, being purposeful.
Yeah.
Or are you being controlled by your urges? And I love the quote that you had on there. So if you feel that rise in your chest or that anger, that heat starting to burn up in your body, am I using my temper or losing it? I love that phrase. And right before this class, I was listening, Frank was listening to an energy worker, and he was talking about going through this process of imagining a box or something, and that you put your thoughts in that box and you just observe them, right? And you go through this process of just not thinking about your thoughts, but observing them in the box as a cloud or bubble or whatever it is. And then you put the box in a warehouse and you walk outside the warehouse. Like you leave the warehouse, you leave the box, your thoughts there. So it was, I was thinking about that when you were talking about detachment from your thoughts and your urges. And the end of his exercise was to go back into the warehouse, open up the box, and only choose to engage with the thoughts that are like, in your words tonight, purposeful, that are doing good for you. And you can leave the rest in the box, close the box, and put it in the warehouse. You can always go back to it if you have to or want to. But that was really a nice description in that of like detachment. It's where you're just observing your thoughts, and you're observing that you're separate from them, and you can be separate from them if you really work on that kind of detachment. I just thought it was ironic that I literally heard that right before this class tonight.
Yeah, it's giving ourselves permission to be the chooser. Purposeful means that we realize that we have the option at some point. We always have the option to decide what comes out of our mouth. We have the option, maybe we can't control what our mind comes up with. That's not within our power, but we get to decide how much airplay it gets, what we're going to focus on, and there's always some place where we can make a stand. We can't control everything, including our own minds. We can't control all the different factors, but we can decide, like, yeah, but I'm going to react to it here in this way, or I'm not going to. I'm going to choose to function in this way. That's where I'm going to decide. That's my purposeful thing. Like, even if I can't not have sweets, I'm going to have them purposefully. You won't find me, face deep in a tub of ice cream against my will, pushed by the urge. I'm going to be purposeful with it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're done. Any more comments, questions, reflections? If not, I'll share the assignment for the week. Okay.
I just want to say thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. That was really a great class. I mean, so many things you said were just really great, and everything everybody shared. So I didn't feel, like to make any statements, but that was nice. Thank you. Good class.
Hare Krishna. I also feel purified. It's a very useful book. It's a very useful purport. So let's see. Yeah, let's just go ahead and read the whole purport to verse 1 this week. And in the group chat and WhatsApp, you can share, again, as always, one reflection, just anything that stood out from the talk that you heard, that you want to repeat. And also, application point. Pick any of the 6 urges. The urge to speak, or pushings of the mind, anger. The tongue means not just speaking anymore, but tasting. The belly, or genitals. Any of those 6. And share some reflection of how you've applied Krishna conscious philosophy around one of those in your life and how it's helped you. So we
distinguish between belly and tongue.
Belly and tongue. Yeah, belly is like I have to eat, I want to feel full. Like wanting to take in, and tongue is the tasting. Yeah. So it'll be I think a little easier to do that if you read the purport first, because Prabhupada gives a lot about each one of these things. And it'll also help us have like a more kind of rich experience next week as we go into anger, tongue, belly, genitals. But you can get some examples by reflecting on that, what you've actually tried to apply around these. Like, for example, I think almost everyone has tried to apply like some regulation around eating more in the mode of goodness, like changing how we eat. So like, yeah, that could be a good reflection point. I guess to kind of like make it easier, pretty much the pattern for all these things is letting go of a lower thing by accepting a higher thing. Using the sense in the highest way possible, as much as possible. And by doing that, losing the urge to kind of do it in lower sense. So give some application of like how you've tried to do that, or how you're going to try to do that. If you want to like take a stand, like I'm going to try to gossip less. I'm going to try to sit with my feeling in my body and notice if I'm starting to experience anger before I act out of anger. If that's one way you want to try to apply, deliberately apply how to find the higher vibration in terms of one of these 6. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about what I'm asking for? So like one reflection point about the class and one application point, what you have done or will do. And I think that's really important with the Nectar of Instruction, because it's all about incorporating these from the theoretical into the practical. And I know for a fact all of us have already begun applying, so there's plenty there to talk about, and probably more as we continue to try to apply more. So that's it. Hare Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami, Nectar of Instruction, Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Bharanti Bhakti Sangha, Nectar of Instruction, Course, Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right. Thanks, everyone. And welcome to Grace, too. We didn't see you at the beginning. I think you came a couple minutes later, but we were just saying hello to new people. So maybe next week we can hear a couple words from you. We're happy to have you, and Corey and Amanda from New Zealand, and everyone else. See you on WhatsApp and in the holy names. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.